Hello and welcome back to another F1 fantasy video. My name's Tom, and in this video I'm going to be looking back briefly at Las Vegas and then ahead to Qatar because there's a very quick changeover. I'm going to have a think about the headline thoughts that are kind of going through my mind at the moment as I process what I want to do for my team selection. I will be firing off the 3x DRS, so that's certainly something I'm going to be discussing about. A couple of quick housekeeping things. First of all, before I start this video properly, I'm speaking quite softly because my daughter's not very well. She's on the room next to me and I don't want to wake her up. So speaking softly for that reason. Turn me up. I'm sorry if I'm a bit quiet. And second reason, second bit of housekeeping is the F1 Fantasy end of year survey that the Fan Amp guys have put together. The link will be in the description down below. If you haven't already filled out the survey, please do. This will go to the F1 Fantasy developers. They're going to listen to us, so please take this opportunity to share your views. It literally takes 5-10 minutes roughly to fill out. It's pretty straightforward. Just, if anything's frustrating you or anything you want change for the game going into next year, just go for it, fill out that survey. So thanks for listening to my little bit of housekeeping, and let's have a quick think about what happened in Las Vegas. For me, well, you can see what happened in Las Vegas for me. 240 points, pretty run-of-the-mill kind of average score. And I'm going to talk about the whole rank stagnation in a bit, because that's basically the state of the season where we're at. I think everyone's kind of got the similar teams and we're just kind of stuck, not really improving rank unless we do something a bit different. So we'll have a think about that in a minute. I went 2 times on Leclerc, which, tried to be a bit different from going with Lando because I thought the Ferraris would be a bit stronger. They were a bit stronger, but, Lando picking up that fastest lap pushed him just over the edge of what Leclerc was able to manage, so lost out literally just a couple of points there. It's not the end of the world. Avoided the DNFs, thank God. I feel like it's been so long since I've actually had a DNF-free week, so it's really nice to avoid the DNFs of Gasly and Albon. I switched out Albon this race for Guan Yu Zhou. So Zhou pulling out 5 points compared to the DNF. Yet another DNF for poor old Albon. Really do. Really pleased that I made that move. And now I'm going to set up for the 3x DRS in Qatar. Another reason why I kept Lando and Leclerc is because they're kind of the most expensive A-tier assets, with the exception of Verstappen, who's just out of my league at the moment in terms of price. So they're the most expensive assets, and that way I could ensure if I wanted Lando and Leclerc, I could hold them, because I was only 0.1, as you can see, the cost cap 0.1 being able to afford this team. So it's super tight. I've already got the 3 cheapest drivers in Bottas, Zhou and Franco anyway. I wanted to ensure I had that 3x possibility if I wanted to go with Leclerc and Norris, but now I've got that flexibility to move down to someone else like Piastri or Sainz or one of the Mercedes guys, for example. That's kind of where I'm at coming out of Las Vegas. Now I just want to have a quick look now at some of the headlines. These are headlines in my own head. Okay, they're not like necessarily actual headlines. They're just things I'm thinking about how I prepare my team selection ideas and go through the kind of thought process of what I want to do going into this penultimate race of the season. The first thing that's on there that's in my kind of mind and is relevant is the rank stagnation. I've got a fairly template team. I think the vast majority of the top 15,000, whatever ranked you are, I've kind of stuck with McLaren, Ferrari assets. There will be a few brave people that kind of trusted and went with the Mercedes in Las Vegas and would have been rewarded, although not greatly rewarded. They didn't score that much more than the likes of McLaren and Ferrari, and that, I think mainly due to pit stop points and things, and fastest lap, that sort of thing. Anyway, the Mercedes were the highest scoring constructor, so there was a slight bit of a gain for anyone that went with them, but the vast majority of people are still kind of sat on the orange and red assets, and it just goes to show that at this stage of the season, particularly myself as an example, I'm sat at 8,898. I was 8,894 before Las Vegas. I dropped 4 places. Just 4 places. That's kind of insane when you think about it. When all the points, are available, everyone's scoring 200 plus points, but the actual window of points being scored is really narrow. Everyone's scoring 230, 240, 250. Everyone's in that window. So although there's a lot of points on offer, everyone's kind of scoring the same points, and even if you did go with Mercedes, maybe you caught a DNF, and the DNFs are so heavy that the minus 20 kind of makes up for the fact that the Mercedes outscored the likes of Ferrari and McLaren. So at the moment, just no one's really moving rank. The only thing really left for me to do is to use that 3x DRS and just hope it pushes me in the right direction. Hope I don't get unfortunate and catch a random DNF or something on the 3x. It'd be just sum up the season beautifully, really, wouldn't it? But yeah, I'm hoping that's not going to happen. But yeah, just kind of on my mind is that there is rank stagnation, and it's really important for these last couple of races to try and find a differential where we can. And I'm not saying pick someone different just for the sake of it. It needs to be backed up with, these guys or this person, this constructor or this driver could actually do well here. You can't just do it on a randomly pick out, I think I'll just put Hamilton in just for a laugh. If you genuinely think that someone's going to potentially do well, just go for it, even if it is, something kind of drastic like dropping Norris or something. I think at this stage of the season, like if you're in a position like me where you've got nothing to lose, I'm sat at 8k, if you're maybe in the top couple of thousand, maybe you want to just kind of play it a bit more safer and kind of hold position, particularly if you don't have any chips left and you've got people like me on the free times that are going to come in for your rank as best I can. Then maybe you just want to kind of play it safe, hope my free times blows up, and you just sat there on your Norris asset or whatever. But yeah, I do think it's important to try and find a differential if we can, and I will be getting on to a potential bit of a differential team when it gets onto the team selection in a few minutes time. But I do want to go through the rest of these kind of headline thoughts first of all. But yeah. The F1 Sims. The F1 Sims fooled us is my next headline. I'm just going to bring that up on screen. This is just what I'm talking about. I think a lot of you will be kind of have this image kind of ingrained into your memory at this point, because I'm sure all of us pretty much probably look at the practice debrief thing on the F1 app or website, whatever you're using. I don't always pay great attention to this like simulation, but the fact that Mercedes were put back so far, 0.41 seconds behind the two other contenders for my constructor slots in particular, McLaren and Ferrari, they're so far back. Normally in recent times it's been a bit closer, maybe a couple of seconds or even just a tenth of a second, but they were so far back, nearly half a second when you think about it. That just really, really put me off. And with that, in combination with a couple of accounts on Twitter that I follow that also post like practice time, long runs and that sort of thing, which also kind of supported the Mercedes weren't that great, and the fact, the drivers were coming out saying, a bit worried about the race pace or whatever. All these combinations came together, and I was just like, right, I can't quite pick Mercedes. I think they're good, but I can't do it. But this is what I'm talking about, the rank stagnation. Maybe there was enough evidence there to just, this might be hindsight talking, but I think there might have been enough evidence there to suggest just to go for them. And I know, obviously, as an outcome, they came first and second, should have gone for them, but we didn't know that obviously before the race, and this simulation did put me off. But it just made me think, for learning for the future, we know, for example, the Mercedes is a bit of a volatile car and only likes certain conditions. We all knew they like the cold conditions, okay? We know that they like these kind of flat, smooth circuits as well. So maybe it was just kind of a nice recipe for them with the conditions and the track layout, and the track surface, that Mercedes were just destined to do well, and we shouldn't pay too much attention to these simulations. It's just made me think, take a little bit more of a pinch of salt when these simulations come out, and don't just think like, this article's put them nearly half a second back behind the other guys that are looking to win the race, so it's just not going to go for it. Maybe just kind of put that on the back burner slightly and think about, actually the car is pretty well suited to this. It's a nice track layout for them as well. And maybe just take a gamble, particularly at this stage of the season when, again, someone with my rank hasn't got too much to lose. If I lose a few thousand, then okay, whatever, I finish 12k instead of 8k, well, who cares? But if I go from 8k up to the top 5k, I feel a lot happier about that. It makes a bit more of a positive difference in my mind. So yeah, just going forward, I'm going to think about these race sims, take them a bit more of a pinch of salt. And of course, we're not really going to get much of a race sim coming out of. We might get some data coming out of this Friday's sessions, but obviously we've got sprint qualifying instead. So we'll obviously get a good idea of where people are in terms of qualifying trim, but we're still not going to really know where the race trim is. So talking of race trim, I was thinking, are Mercedes actually going to be kind of good around Qatar? I've just sort of stated they like the cooler conditions, and I know Qatar is basically in a desert and it's going to be hot, but they have moved the race further along the calendar to stop it from being quite so hot and unpleasant for the drivers as it was last season. If you remember, the likes of Logan Sargent literally had to DNF because he couldn't handle it. It was just too hot and he was feeling sick and faint or whatever, and he had to come out. And I think Lance Stroll as well commented on the fact that the race felt like he was unconscious going through some corners or something. I can't remember the exact wording, but it was something extreme. There's extreme heat in Qatar, so you're thinking Mercedes, not going to do so well. But because it's a nighttime race, they've moved the race further along the calendar. It is going to be a bit cool. I've had a look at the the temperature around the race time. This is a few days out from the actual weekend, but it's looking around like low 20 degrees Celsius, which is actually like pretty cool, like in comparison to what I would have expected. I was thinking like it's going to be like 30 degrees or something, but it's actually like fairly significantly cooler than that, which might help Mercedes. Of course, it's not just about temperature, it's about track layout as well, and whether they're going to be good for those high-speed corners, and whether those high-speed corners, those longer sort of duration, high-speed, high stress on the tyres, is that going to generate heat, which is going to be uncontrollable for the Mercedes guys. It's an unknown for me, but it's something that's in my mind that maybe this isn't such a bad track for them after all. And I was actually, if I just hide this for 2 seconds, let's just bring that up. If I can, there we go. We got there in the end. I'll just bring up F1 Fancy Tools, so you can see I've ranked it here by Qatar. You can see here George Russell came fourth in terms of fantasy points last season. I think he actually finished the race in fourth place. Where are we? Race position 12 points for finishing. Yeah, that would be fourth, isn't it? Yeah, so he came fourth. Bunch of overtakes as well. Really impressive. I remember he kept getting lots of good overtakes in there. But yeah, I do think Mercedes obviously isn't that drastically different to what it was last season, so maybe can do well. And I know Hamilton, he DNF'd with a collision with George Russell on like the first lap, I think, wasn't it? Pretty crazy, but also, he scored pretty well in the sprint. So just kind of food for thought, I guess, that maybe the Mercedes are not going to be quite as bad as we initially thought. And I got into this weekend thinking, I'm definitely going to be like McLaren, Ferrari. I'm looking at Leclerc and Norris. But maybe I'm actually thinking more about the team in green, team in not Aston Martin, no, the team in green in terms of the F1 Fantasy colour coding is the Mercedes, and I do think that they could be a bit of a differential over the likes of Ferrari, because the Ferraris are still going to be heavily owned, but perhaps going with Mercedes, gambling a little bit that they are going to do well. Of course, we've got the sprint qualifying, so we can have a good idea, at least in qualifying trim, exactly where they're going to stack up. But Russell's been really impressive for most of this season. I would say actually he's done really well. And that's not to say Hamilton hasn't, but Hamilton's had a couple of mistakes here and there. We saw in Las Vegas where he messed up his qualifying. If he hadn't messed up qualifying, he could have probably quite easily, or not necessarily easily, but quite comfortably perhaps won Las Vegas if he hadn't messed up his qualifying. But he messed up in both his Q3 runs. So, but yeah, my point is that maybe Ferrari are less suited to this, although they do like the higher temperatures, but the temperatures aren't going to be that high. They haven't been that great through the high speed corners, and this entire track is just high speed corners. I think it was Leclerc, if not Leclerc and Sainz, and definitely Fred Vasseur all come out and basically said that Qatar is not a track that suits us. So in fact, they're already kind of planting that negativity in their mind about going into this weekend. Makes me think maybe Ferrari aren't quite such a great option as maybe a lot of people were thinking they might be this weekend. I do think they'll be good going through Abu Dhabi, but I'm just thinking, is this another opportunity perhaps where we can just move away from the Ferraris, move away from that bulk high percentage owned constructor and driver assets, and just kind of take a bit of a gamble on someone like Mercedes, perhaps. In terms of 3 times and 2 times DRS options, that also kind of opens up some opportunity, because in fact if I can move things along, I'm just trying to hide that for a second. I'll bring it up to my team, so that final headline kind of segues quite nicely into my actual team and what I want to do with my 3 times and my 2 times. Like I said, I've kind of set up with Leclerc, Norris here coming out of Las Vegas, because I was thinking that they would be my favourite options, and I'd probably just like 3 times Lando, 2 times Leclerc, but I'm thinking more and more like not quite sold on Ferrari, and they weren't great round here last season. Again, if we just flick it back to what happened last year, where are the Ferraris in here? This is from 2023, in case you hadn't noticed up the top. I don't know if you can see that on the screen. There you go. 2023, this is from last year's, obviously, because it's the full calendar filled up there. So Qatar, Verstappen, and 2 McLarens were the highest scoring, and Russell just behind. And I do think Hamilton would have been up there as well if he hadn't DNF'd. But where are the Ferraris? Leclerc down here into 22 points, and I know Sainz obviously had the did not start situations. We didn't actually race on the Sunday, but nevertheless, still not filling me with great confidence from the Ferrari boys. Let's throw it back again. So yeah, the fact that the McLarens and even Verstappen were good here last season, excuse me, and I do believe that they're going to be good around here this season. it makes me think maybe I move away from this red in my team, to the point where, as I've already discussed, I could look at Mercedes, and that gives me enough funds to get basically whoever I want down here. I could kind of just cover it off with a triple up and hope that the sprint winner from here last season is going to kind of replicate that kind of form, and go with a team like this. Another thing I've kind of thought about is a bit spicy and it's a bit risky, but I've just talked about differential stuff, and I kind of like it in a sickening kind of way, is going Red Bull. I would also have to drop Lando Norris for this master plan and go like Piastri, Russell. I can just about afford this team, and I'm not lying when I say I am genuinely considering this team. It doesn't have Leclerc, it doesn't have Norris, and you might be thinking like, well, if you want to put the 3 times on them, so you've got to go with that. But I've already talked, first of all, about how Mercedes might actually be decent here. George Russell's in good form. He's on the back of obviously a victory. He likes his track. I mentioned a video or two ago that in a YouTube video that F1 posted, they asked all the drivers what are their 3 favourite tracks, and George Russell did state that Qatar was one of his favourite tracks, and he did really well here last season. So that's a thing for me when I'm looking at which drivers to pick. It's a genuine factor I factor in, is, you know, which drivers genuinely like the track, and, you know, as an example, Leclerc around Monaco, Leclerc around Baku, that sort of thing. Hamilton around Silverstone, as an example. So George Russell around Qatar, maybe this is his track. I don't know. So kind of tempted by him. And also, like I've said, Piastri and the McLaren looks good. Piastri has kind of fallen away a little bit in recent races, but he's still there or thereabouts. And I think he's actually kind of on par, or even not just doing better than Lando Norris in recent weeks. And I think he would have done a lot better in Brazil as well. Obviously, the wet weather kind of messed everything up there, unless your name was Max Verstappen. But he would have had that sprint win around Brazil if he hadn't just given it to Lando Norris for absolutely no reason, as it turned out. But yeah, I do kind of like Piastri, and although he's a lot of chat saying he's due a DNF, because he hasn't DNF'd at all this season, it would just be like perfect bad luck if I put the 3 times on Piastri and he finally catches a DNF. It would be pretty rough, but no, I at this stage of the season, it's like, what is there to lose? You might be asking, like, what's the point in doing this? Like, why not just stick with likes of Lando as the 3 times? And I'm still very much considering that, and of course it still depends on sprint qualifying, but I'm kind of interested in the Red Bull Racing team, and that's something I've not said in a long time. It's been quite a few months where I've actually, since I've seriously considered Red Bull Racing as a constructor, it's always been like between the 3, you know, McLaren, Mercedes and Ferrari. But I'm actually like seriously considering them as a bit of a differential. I don't know actually what their ownership overall is. 23%, so it's not too much, but I imagine in the top like 10k where I'm sat at the moment, I reckon Red Bull Racing are very low owned. Very low owned. I could look at the F1 Fantasy version 2 thingamajiggy, F1 Fantasy Tools thingy, but I can't bother to load it up at the moment. It's too much of a faff. But yeah, I do think that Red Bull will be very low, and I don't think I even need to look. They're just going to be very low and guaranteed. And I think they're going to be strong around here. We know they're good around the high-speed corners. Max Verstappen is driving extremely well, even though the car hasn't been great recently. And I do think that if Max has got a chance to win out these last couple of races, I think Qatar is a great opportunity for him. They were obviously struggling quite a lot through the practice sessions and weren't especially great around Las Vegas, but this is quite a different track to Las Vegas, which I think is going to suit both McLarens and Red Bulls. So I just think as a potential differential, obviously the big red flag here is the fact that Perez was also going to get scored in the Red Bull Racing category here. Obviously, in fact, if we quickly throw it back to F1 Fantasy Tools, put it back to 2024, and just have a look how the Red Bull constructors have done recently, considering Perez's form. Let's just have a little look and how it compares to the likes of everyone else. So if we go down to constructors, you can see in recent weeks, obviously had a phenomenal weekend in Brazil. Almost doubled everyone else's score here because of Max Verstappen's insane drive. I don't expect anything like that necessarily again for Qatar, but you never know. Deceptively high number of overtakes around Qatar. I would have thought it's not a track that's actually very good for overtakes, but apparently it is. Quite a few overtakes here last season. And yeah, anyway, going back to what I was talking about, Red Bull, in terms of what they're scoring, 55, 96, obviously a bit of an anomaly there, 41, 72, 47, couple of iffy ones there. Like there's not been great, but they've also not been a million miles from the likes of Ferrari and Mercedes. I'm not moving away from McLaren because I think this is a perfect weekend for them. But I do think it might be an opportunity to potentially move away from Ferrari. And if I'm not going Mercedes, then Red Bull are just an option there. I can't get Verstappen in as the 3 times DRS because he's just too expensive in comparison to the likes of Red Bull as a constructor. So if I want to cover off Max Verstappen around Qatar, I'd have to go constructor way, which is what I'm looking at. But yeah, their scores haven't been a million miles away from the likes of Ferrari or Mercedes, and they've even outscored them on a couple of weekends here or there. And like I say, if I think that it's going to be a good weekend for Red Bull, then this could be a great opportunity to gather those Max Verstappen points. And who knows, maybe Perez is finally due a good race. Maybe, I don't know. He's had let's have a quick look at him. Let's have a look at his sorry state of affairs recently. So, to be fair, he's not even done too badly recently. 26 points was in a sprint, and 19 points was also in a sprint. Actually, it's not especially great. So in the non-sprint weekends, he's done like 9, 10, and 18. It's pretty bad. And before that, yeah, kind of hovering around this kind of 15-point mark. But if he can do that and Max Verstappen gets a win or second place, or does well in the sprint and the race, and Perez just doesn't DNF, although he did DNF around here in the sprint last year, duly noted. Yeah, I do think surely Perez is due a decent result. He can't keep going out in Q1. He can't keep doing this. It's like he's got to be racing for his future here. These last 2 races have surely, if he's not already got all his nails in his coffin already, then I do think that if he doesn't do well around the next 2 races, surely he's out of the seat next season. It's just, I don't know. He's got to improve at some point. So maybe this is a chance where the track should suit his car. Maybe he can finally pull something out the bag. But yeah, I am kind of really tempted by something like this. I wish I had a bit more money. If I did have a bit more money, then I would go with a Lando Norris. I could still go Leclerc, but I don't think I want to go down that route if I'm picking this sort of team. I would rather have Lando Norris and then 2 times George, but I'm still open to the fact that I can just 3 times Piastri and 2 times Russell and kind of hope for the best. Hope that these as a differential, this is a massive differential team. Red Bull as a constructor, 3 times Piastri, 2 times Russell, like no one's going to be really covering off these assets to a great extent. And if they kick off, then I could fly up the rankings. It would be a pretty nice kind of end to the season. So let's just reset it just really quickly. If I don't decide to go with that, if I want to stick for a bit more of a conventional team, then I could, just exactly not do anything. Just go with this. If the Ferraris do actually look quite decent, and Leclerc qualifies well in sprint qualifying, I could just sit like this: 3 times Norris, 2 times Leclerc. I've already touched on the fact I might just triple up on McLarens. I could also switch out Ferrari down to Mercedes, which again will kind of depend on free practice 1 and sprint qualifying. I think unless I go with the Red Bull constructor team what I just showed you, that's the only reason I would ever move off Lando Norris. And just having the 3 times also might be enough of a differential to not need to faff around going down the Red Bull route and that sort of thing. I think it's something like 20-25% of teams in the top 500 have still got the 3 times left. That means 75% of people up in the top 500 have used their 3 times DRS already, and I'm sure that number is fairly reflective across the top few thousand. So just by virtue of having the 3 times DRS chip this coming weekend might already just be enough of a differential to push me up. But if I really want to hammer it home and try and spike a big performance, then depending on sprint quality, etc., then maybe that Red Bull team is the way to go. But otherwise, I'll probably play it safe, do kind of what's on screen. Like I say, it might flip between Ferrari and Mercedes, depending again on what happens in practice and qualifying. But most likely, I just think that McLaren is going to be good here. And although they haven't done great in recent weeks, I do kind of have faith in both Lando and Piastri. So I might just 3 times Norris, 2 times Piastri, and kind of be done with it. But it's the end of the season, my rank's kind of sitting around not doing a great deal. Maybe it's time for some spice. I don't know. What do you think? Anyway, thanks very much for listening to me. One more race weekend to go after this. So I take a quick opportunity to just say thank you to everyone that's stuck by me, because I know you guys probably don't care, but my views have kind of nosedived in recent weeks. But that's fine. I still enjoyed doing the videos. I'm not here just to get views. I'm here to kind of interact with people that are interested in interacting. So thank you very much to you guys who are still commenting on my videos, still giving it the thumbs up and everything, and sticking with me to the end of the season. I really appreciate you guys. So thank you very much for listening to me, and I'll catch you again soon for some more F1 fantasy. Enjoy the sprint weekend, guys, and see you soon.